Stop rereading. The architecture of memory. You think you know how to read. You've been doing it since you were 5 or 6 years old. You open a book. Your eyes scan the lines. The words form sentences. The sentences form ideas. And you turn the page. It feels like work. It feels like learning. You sit there for hours, highlighter in hand, painting the page neon yellow, convinced that because you are moving your eyes over the text, you are absorbing it. You finish the chapter. You feel good. You feel productive. And then, the next day, or maybe even just an hour later, you try to recall what you read. Not just the vague topic, but the substance, the arguments, the mechanics. And there is nothing there. Just a fog. A vague sense of familiarity, sure. You recognize the words if you see them again. But you cannot use them. You cannot explain them. Why? Why does it feel like you learned it when you didn't? Why is the human brain so incredibly good at fooling itself into thinking it understands something when it has only recognized it? This is the trap, the illusion of competence. And almost everyone falls into it. We treat our brains like empty buckets and information like water. We think if we just pour the words in, they will stay. But the brain is not a bucket. It is a sieve, a very specific biological sieve that is actively trying to dump everything you just put into it. Marty Lobdell, a psychology professor who spent decades watching students fail despite working incredibly hard, realized something fundamental. The problem wasn't their intelligence. It wasn't their motivation. It was their mechanism. They were fighting the biology of their own minds. They were rereading. And rereading is the single most inefficient way to encode information into the human brain. It is the intellectual equivalent of trying to carve a statue by rubbing it with a soft cloth. It feels smooth, it feels safe, but it makes no lasting impression. Let's dig into why. To understand why Lobdell's system works, and why your current method fails, we have to look at the hardware. We have to look at the neuron. When you read something for the first time, a temporary chemical trace is created in your brain. It's a fragile thing. A distinct pattern of electrochemical firing. This is your short-term memory. It's meant to be fleeting. It's meant to dissolve. If you remembered every license plate you saw on the way to work, every face in the crowd, every cloud shape, your brain would be paralyzed by noise. Forgetting is a survival mechanism. Your brain is designed to filter out the meaningless. When you reread a textbook chapter immediately after reading it, or when you read it again the next day without testing yourself, you are triggering that same temporary chemical pathway. And because the pathway is already there, because it's primed, the information flows through it easily. This ease, this feeling of smoothness, is what psychologists call fluency. And fluency is a liar. You interpret that ease as knowing. You tell yourself, oh yeah, I know this, I've seen this. But you don't know it. You just recognize it. Creating a memory requires a physical change. It requires protein synthesis. It requires a structural alteration of the synapse. And the brain will not make that expensive biological investment unless you force it to. So, how do you force it? You stop looking at the information. You look away. This is the first, most painful, and most critical step in Lobdell's philosophy. You have to embrace the struggle of retrieval. Imagine you are walking through a dense forest. There is no path. You have to hack your way through the undergrowth with a machete. It is exhausting. It takes time. That is the first time you learn something hard. Now, if you just turn around and walk back, or if you wait a week and try to find that path again, it will be gone. The jungle grows back fast, but if you force yourself to walk that same path again and again, not by looking at a map, but by memory, the path gets beaten down. The dirt becomes hard-packed. Eventually, it becomes a road. Rereading is like looking at a map of the forest comfortably from a helicopter. You see the path. It looks clear. You think, I know where that is. But you aren't on the ground. You aren't clearing the brush. You aren't building the neural infrastructure. Lobdell introduced a concept that changes everything: the study session limit. He asked his students fundamental questions. How long can you actually study before your mind starts to wander? Not how long you can sit there, but how long until the processing stops. For most people, it's about 25 to 30 minutes. That's it. After that, you are just looking at glowing lights or ink on paper. The efficiency drops to zero. But we ignore this. We push through. We sit in the library for 6 hours straight, fueled by caffeine and panic, and we think we did a good job. But the brain has a rhythmic limit. You need to break it. You study for 25 minutes, and then you stop. You step away. You do something fun. You reward the brain. This isn't just about feeling good. It's about operant conditioning. If studying is nothing but pain and boredom for 4 hours, your brain will subconsciously develop an aversion to it. It will distract you. It will make you sleepy. It will do anything to escape. But if there is a small treat, a piece of chocolate, a song, a walk, waiting at the end of the 25 minutes, the brain reinforces the behavior. It's primitive, yes, but we are biological machines. We have to respect the machinery. But the break is also where the magic happens. It's where the consolidation begins. If you keep shoveling information in without a pause, you overwrite the previous data before it can set. It's like trying to write in wet cement that hasn't dried yet. You just end up with a mess. Now, let's talk about the specific technique, the active recall. The SQ3R method, or similar variations, often boil down to one thing: testing. But not a test in school, a test of self. When you finish a page, or a concept, or a section, you close the book. You look at a blank wall, and you ask, "What did I just read?" Try it. It's horrifying. The first time you do this, you will panic. You will realize that you remember almost nothing intact. You might get a vague feeling, a keyword, but the structure is gone. That panic, that is good. That is the sensation of your brain realizing it has a gap. That strain you feel when you try to pull the information out of the void. That strain is the feeling of learning. That is the machete hacking through the jungle. If it doesn't hurt, if it isn't a struggle, you aren't learning, you are just reviewing. Lobdell takes this a step further with what he calls teaching, and this is, arguably, the most powerful tool in the arsenal. He says you should articulate what you learned to someone else. If you don't have a willing victim, talk to an empty chair. Talk to your cat. It doesn't matter. What matters is the act of vocalization and restructuring. When you read, the information is passive. It has holes in it that you don't see because your brain fills in the gaps with assumptions. But when you speak, when you have to form a coherent sentence, those holes become visible. You can't speak a loophole. You stumble. You pause. You realize, wait, I don't actually understand how step A leads to step B. That moment of stumbling is where the work begins. You go back. You fill the gap. You try again. This is why groups can be effective, but only if the group is talking. If you are just sitting there listening to the smart kid explain it, you are falling into the same trap. You are watching him hack through the jungle and thinking his path is yours. It isn't. You have to hold the machete. Let's go deeper into the environment. Context-dependent memory. This is a strange feature of our biology. We associate information with the place where we learned it. If you study for a history exam lying in your bed, your brain associates the Crusades with your pillow, with sleep, with relaxation. The cues are wrong. When you walk into the exam room, the environment is sterile, cold, quiet. The cues are missing, and the memory becomes harder to access. Lobdell insists on a dedicated study area, a lamp, a specific desk, a specific chair. When you sit there, the brain knows it is time to encode. You trigger a state of mind just by being physically present. And paradoxically, once you have learned it well in that specific environment, you need to test it in others. But for the initial encoding, consistency is key. Don't study in the bed you sleep in. Don't study at the table where you eat and watch Netflix. The brain needs boundaries. It needs to know which mode to be in. But there is a missing piece. something even more fundamental than the study session. Sleep. We live in a culture that fetishizes the all-nighter, the heroic student who drinks 3 Red Bulls and studies until 4 a.m. We view sleep as time wasted, time that could be spent cramming another fact in. This is not just wrong, it is scientifically illiterate. Sleep is not a pause button. The brain does not shut off when you sleep. It shifts gears. It goes into a high-active processing state. During REM sleep and deep slow-wave sleep, the hippocampus, the part of your brain that holds those new, fragile memories, starts to talk to the neocortex, the part of the brain that stores long-term structural knowledge. It replays the day's events. It replays the study session. It literally fires the same neurons again, but thousands of times faster, compressing the data, stripping away the noise, and cementing the core concepts. If you don't sleep, that transfer doesn't happen. You can study for 12 hours, but if you only sleep for 4, you have thrown away the majority of that effort. The data remains in the fragile chemical state. It washes away. The all-nighter is a biological bankruptcy. You are trading long-term retention for short-term adrenaline. You might pass the test the next morning barely, but 3 days later, gone. It was never truly yours. And this brings us to the most uncomfortable truth Lobdell reveals. The difference between studying and learning. Most of us don't want to learn. We want to pass. We want the credential. We want the grade. So we adopt strategies that are optimized for short-term regurgitation. Rereading, cramming, highlighting. These are strategies for survival, not for growth. They are fast food strategies. They fill you up immediately but provide no nutrition. True learning is a transformation. It changes who you are. When you truly learn a concept, whether it's the physics of light, the history of Rome, or the syntax of a coding language, you are physically altering the structure of your brain. You are building new networks that will continually reference other networks. Think about the most brilliant person you know. Not necessarily the one with the best grades, but the one who seems to just get things. The one who can connect two seemingly unrelated ideas, like the behavior of water tides and the gravity of the moon, and see the pattern. How do they do that? It's not magic. It's because they have a deep, robust web of concepts stored in their long-term memory. They have cleared thousands of paths in their jungle. So when a new piece of information comes in, they don't just throw it in a bucket. They hang it on a hook. They connect it to an existing path. When you reread, you are denying yourself that web. You are keeping the information isolated, on the surface, waiting to be washed away. So, what is the protocol? What is the system? First, accept that your focus is finite. Work in bursts. 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. Respect the rhythm. Second, stop rereading. Read it once, with intense focus. Then close the book. Third, recite. Speak it out loud. Reconstruct the argument. If you can't say it, you don't know it. Find the gap, open the book, fix the gap, close the book, try again. Fourth, structure the information. Don't just memorize facts. Facts are useless loose change. Look for the concepts. The why. Facts hang on concepts like leaves hang on branches. If you have the branch, the leaves will stay. If you just grab a handful of leaves, the wind will blow them away. Fifth, sleep. Protect your sleep like it is part of the work, because it is part of the work. This requires a change in identity. You have to move from being a consumer of information to a processor of information. It requires humility. You have to be willing to look at a page you just read, look at a blank wall, and admit, I have no idea what that said. That moment of failure is the beginning of competence. Most people go through life collecting familiarities. They watch a documentary and say, I know about black holes. They read a news article and say, I understand the economy. But they don't. They just recognize the vocabulary. They are tourists in the land of knowledge. They take pictures, but they don't live there. To live there, to really own the knowledge, you have to build the house yourself, brick by brick, recall by recall. The Lobdell system isn't just a study tip, it's a rejection of the superficial. It's a commitment to depth. It asks you to stop pretending. Stop moving your eyes over the page and calling it work. Stop highlighting entire paragraphs until the book glows in the dark. That isn't studying. That's coloring. Real study is silence, followed by a question, followed by the struggle to answer. It is the active, painful, beautiful process of carving a new pathway in the physical matter of your brain. So, the next time you sit down to learn something, really learn something, put the highlighter down. Read the section, close the book, and ask yourself, what was that? And when the silence answers you, don't be discouraged. That silence is the canvas. Start painting. Start speaking. Start teaching the empty room. Because the goal isn't to get through the book. The goal is to get the book through you. And that only happens when you close it and open your mind.